Let's create a budget. Let's get out of debt. Let's build wealth. Guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. So in the previous video, the simplistic design, I kind of went over this model or design that I built here, where basically your income will go into the debt tool. That debt tool will wipe out the debt, and then once that debt tool is replenished, it will go on to the next debt, and then you will slowly go on from debt to debt, paying off all of this debt. Then once all of that is done, you would then turn around and use that debt tool, to create passive income with, we have infinite banking as our foundation, and then you'll use that debt tool to acquire passive income, whether that's real estate or, dividend income, starting a business. You'll constantly, it's a cycle that continues on and on. So you'll use that very thing that basically caused you all the problems in the first place, debt, and turn it around and use it to get out of debt. So that was more of a sort of a idea of a picture, kind of to illustrate kind of how it worked. In this video, I'm going to go over my thought process and creating a flow chart, basically the way in which this flows. So the basic design is the debt tool. You'll wipe out a debt, and from there the income will go into the debt tool. The debt tool will then, once it's replenished, will then wipe out debt again. So kind of looking at the most simplistic view of it, we would have our income. Our income would go into the debt tool. So once you have chunked that debt, once you have that line of debt tool, could be a line of credit, a HELOC, home equity line of credit, personal line of credit, or a credit card. And let's say let's say we're looking at a card, for example, in velocity banking, this velocity banking part of it, you would, if you had a $5,000 line of credit, you had a $15,000 balance on the card, you would chunk the $5,000 to the card, knocking that principal down to $10,000. Then all of your income that was coming into the house would go into your line of credit. If this was a credit card and you were still trying to pay that car off, you would, all of your monthly expenses, utilities, any monthly expense that you could pay with a credit card, you would pay it with the credit card. Normally you would pay those bills, that cash would come out of your checking account to pay those bills. In velocity banking, the credit card would pay the bills. You would then take the cash and dump the cash onto the principal of the car. So it doesn't matter what the debt tool is, but the income would go into the debt tool. Your entire income sits in there until you need it, and then you take it out. Then from there, it will go to the debt. So yeah, from the debt tool, you chunk it onto your debt. Then once all your debt's paid off, the model, the flow of the design, this really doesn't change. The income will go into your debt tool. This time that debt tool would be used to create passive income. So technically you never will be out of debt. Once that debt's paid off, you create more debt by chunking that $5,000 that you were chunking to pay that car off. You now will chunk it to buy down payment on a house, dividend portfolio. It doesn't matter, any asset that produces income, you would chunk, and then you would follow that same design. So to take this even farther, I then decided that, okay, so the income, it says the income into the debt tool, but the income is first going to go into your checking account. So you get paid from work or your job, that money will go into your checking account. From your checking account, it will go into the debt tool after you have chunked that and you're replenishing this so that you can use that tool again. So from the debt tool, you'll chunk that to the debt, which is bad debt. So before you start investing by clearing out debt first. And this is a point where a lot of people differ. I mean, if you understand, if you're good at math, and obviously if you have paid everything down off except maybe a mortgage, or in a case where your investments, it has a higher return than the actual interest or that you're paying on a debt, then you could switch it. But just for the most safest and best route to go, you pay off your debt. Debt tool chunks to the bad debt. Once all of that debt, so I took that top model of where income was going into the debt tool was paying off debt, and that bottom model where the income was going into the debt tool, and the debt tool was paying passive income. In order to create a flow here, once the bad debt is paid off, then that debt tool will be used for good debt. The good debt is, in my mind, good debt is basically debt that you have that you could pay off instantly. So something like, where or basically you could liquidate and you no longer would have that debt. If for some reason your cash flow stopped, you could always liquidate and pay it back. So technically you're never in debt, you're just kind of borrowing to use it. So if this is, let's just say a dividend portfolio, for example, and it's producing dividends, that dividends will then be reinvested back in to your income. It's basically income. It goes back in the checking account, back in the debt tool to buy more debt. So after this, I thought, okay, so we need to put our foundation, which is the infinite banking concept, into this flow. So we will have our bank, back here, we will have our bank going in as income. When you transfer from your bank to your, it'll come as income going into your checking account, which will then become your debt tool to pay off debt or to buy more good debt. Now, a lot of people get confused. The reason I'm making this flow chart and this model before, and doing this step by step, is for people to understand that if a problem arises, right, you have your flow going here, you have your flow, and then if a problem or something happens, you don't have to question what happens. The flow continues. You just go on with the flow. You put it at whatever point. So if you're like, okay, I just all of a sudden my daughter got braces and it's going to cost me $3,000. What do I do? Well, if you're taking a loan from your bank, it's just going to become income, go into the checking account and then the debt tool. You don't have to stop the flow. You continue on with the flow. So from this design, we have, there's another step in here, because when your income comes into your checking account, it goes to your debt tool. Well, that money is going to sit in your debt tool, and when you need it, you still got to pay your bills. So your bills from your checking account, it will go to your bills, and you have a flow here, but then there's kind of like an outflow. So when it's flowing through this, it's going through this flow right here. At some point, some of that is going to come out of the flow, which is your bills. So that flow was kind of broken. So what I did was, the from your checking account, and that flow is really your expenses, right? Because there's more than just bills, but your expenses come out. One of those expenses is the bills. And, we had the bank over here on the left side. Well, now your bank is technically, if your bank is maxed out, if your MEC limit is maxed out, then you'll eventually take a loan from that. And basically that income comes into the checking account. Even though it's being parked in the debt tool, if you watch the videos on creating a budget, we keep our checking account at a required amount, and then that overflow goes into the debt tool. So when your income comes into the checking account and it comes down to pay your expenses are broken up into, one would be a bank, because you'll be paying yourself back. And then when you take a loan from this bank, it becomes your income. which goes into your checking account, which funnels over to your debt tool, which is hopefully if you have the bad debt, it'll pay that. If not, you'll be paying the good debt. And then good debt produces income that comes back into the checking account. So when the expenses come out, you'll have your bills, and there's probably always going to be a payment to your bank, whether you're making a payment to build your MEC limit, to reach your MEC limit, or whether you're making a payment to pay off a loan that you borrowed. I mean, the whole banking concept is money and flow. So, you don't want to drain it to empty, but you do want to utilize, if you can, you really feel that you can make a better return than the 4% guaranteed in the dividends and interest that you're getting, then you want to pull some of this out to use it, replenish your debt tool, and then use to buy good debt to produce more income and increase this bank higher and higher. So expenses, the flow, it'll come to checking account, it'll flow over, and it'll constantly be moving in a pattern of income, checking, debt tool. You'll bypass bad debt once you're out of it, go to good debt, income, checking account. But then when it's needed, the expenses will come out. You'll split that between your bills, your bank, and then there's one other one, which is your budget. So if you watch the previous videos, we don't use budget apps. In order to make this as simple as possible, then you'll open a second checking account, which you will use as your budget. It'll track everything for you. You don't have to worry about entering amounts. You don't have to worry about entering descriptions on bills or anything like that. You will be able to have a record from that second checking account of everything you need. And remember that second checking account, your budget account, that $100 is your 0 point. If you have $99 in your budget account, you're negative and you need to bring that back. Okay, so you can kind of see the flow now. Income, checking account, expenses, bank, income, checking account, expenses, bank, income, checking account, debt tool, pay off debt if you have it. If you don't, debt tool goes to good debt, back to income, checking account. Bills come out when they're needed. Pay your budget at the first of every month. Pay your bills, back to the bank. So that final design basically looks here. You'll start here. All income coming into the house will go into your primary checking account, or your bill account, as I call it. And then from your bill account, it'll go into your line of credit. This line of credit leverage is one of the most important things to have. That line of credit, the leverage here will accelerate all of this. So that's the velocity banking part. Make sure that you use leverage. A thing on leverage is, if you don't have a personal line of credit or a HELOC, if you don't have a house, a personal line of credit is the best thing. If you don't have a personal line of credit, or you tried to get one and you got declined, go to a local credit union, open up an account. Once you open that account, you're going to be sitting in the office with someone and then talk to the people and say, hey, I am working on, I would like to get a line of credit. What do you guys look for? What all is involved? What do I need to do? Say, I don't want to apply right now. I just kind of want to know what y'all look for when applying for this. And then, grab the lady or gentleman's card. When you get home a day or two later, make sure that you say your name, introduce yourself, say your name, ask them what their name is. Even if you know what it is, ask him or her what their name is. When you get home a day or two later, come up with another question. Call the bank, ask for that person that you talked to. Say, hey, this is Yaya. We met a couple days ago. I was asking about the line of credit. Hey, another question crossed my mind. And start to build a relationship with that person. And when you're talking to them, find out who it is that actually approves the line of credit. If they're not the one who approves it, ask who it is that approves it. Get their first and last name. Call the bank. Ask to talk to them. They may say that they're at a corporate office or something like that. Ask for the phone number. And then call that person. Let that be the person. Call them and say, hey, I visited the bank today. I started an account with you guys. I am looking to open a line of credit. I don't want to do it right now because I just started. I kind of want to know what all that they look for so that I can prepare and make sure that I have all my ducks in a row, or however you want to say it, and then, they'll talk to you and stuff. And then once they talk to you, make sure you get their name, call them back 2 or 3 days later, call them back and say, hey, I had one more question about the line of credit. And then call them back again, like a week, a month later. Make sure you don't go too long. Call them back and say, hey, I have my credit score, it jumped up because I paid off some debt. Well, I was trying to remember what you said as far as what I needed, and just kind of build a relationship with them. And when you go to apply, even if they wouldn't normally approve you for a line of credit, they'll see your name and they'll be like, oh, okay, they've been talking to you, and more than likely they're gonna approve you if you build that relationship. And make sure to keep your account in order. You got your separate accounts. Keep your bill account in order. Keep it at the required checking account amount, and keep your other account. Make sure you don't go below that $100 minimum. That shows that you understand how to control an account. So make sure you do that. So once you get the debt tool, you'll chunk from your line of credit to your bad debt. There's videos I've made on velocity banking, if you don't understand fully velocity banking, watch some of those videos. But once that bad debt is paid off, that debt tool it'll bypass through here, and it'll come back. You start buying assets. This is where you start increasing your wealth. From that point, you're jumping from this debt tool, debt side on the left side, you're jumping over to this right side, where now you're starting to create income. And then from there, that income, if you're doing a dividend, don't reinvest the dividends, bring it back into your income, back into your line of credit to pay this debt tool back off. Now, technically you are reinvesting dividends, you are building that compounding effect, but what's going to happen is you're chunking and buying a ton of it at once, replenishing it and buying it again. So technically those dividends will pay off this debt tool. You would then use the debt tool to buy more dividend producing or asset producing assets. So, and then your expenses come out every month. Make the budget. This is your second checking account. You'll just make that as if it was a bill on your sheet. Everyday expenses come out, that's just part of the everyday utilities, things like that. And then take a loan out, make sure you pay yourself back. So if you're in the phase of, the bad debt phase, and you have a flow here, this flow doesn't stop, right? You're constantly going through this flow over and over. The check accounts come out. Now, if something happens to interrupt this flow to where, all of a sudden this right here is the problem. So this, make sure I highlight this, is the problem. This is where your discipline and stuff. So if your budget, if you have an emergency, right, because you didn't really plan here for emergency, this bank is here to help. This is the foundation. It's here to help to make sure that this flow doesn't get interrupted, because this flow right here is basically the only thing you need. That simple design, simplistic design, as I said in the last video, is the only thing you need to become wealthy. So what you're going to do here is, if something happens, and you'll see this, and when I get into the working model of this, that if you have an emergency, say your transmission go out, or Christmas is coming up and there's something that's not part of your normal budget, you're going to take a loan out. You're going to add that as a bill, which will really become right here an everyday expense. And then you'll just make a payment back to yourself, and it never stops the flow. So, this is the basic design, and hopefully, by understanding the flow, that it'll help you to understand what happens. So if something arises, it does not matter. Nothing matters. You just put it in where it goes. If you, let's say, I don't know, you had four flat tires, right? It's just you would take a loan to pay for that, and then you add it as an expense, and then now you got it. It will reduce your cash flow a little bit, but that cash flow that's being reduced is going back to you. That's the genius of having this whole thing and having that bank there. So now if you have a problem, you know, and your car breaks down, you're catching Uber or Lyft to work, it's like a double whammy, because you got to pay to go to work and you got to pay to get your car fixed. And if you don't have any money, you're either borrowing from friends or taking out a loan or doing something. Now you have this bank to back you up. So guys, I hope that this helped. If you found value in this video and you haven't subscribed yet, I really appreciate it if you subscribe. It helps to get this video out. Clicking a thumbs up helps the YouTube algorithm push this video to more and more people. And guys, you know, this step by step, you don't fully have to grasp or get this right now. I mean, you can always come back to it, but in order to create a budget, get out of debt, and build wealth, you got to understand the whole process of it. You got to understand what to do, so you're not asking questions every time something comes up. Every time something happens, I seem to get questions over and over, and I'm like, the design is there. Nothing changes. You know, if something happens, you take a loan from your bank, right? If you're not using credit cards or nothing, your checking account is already built up to a required checking account amount. So if something happens, then what you're going to do is, if you have a credit card, you could just pay for it with the credit card. Say that was $500. You'll take a loan from your bank for $500. And then when you see the working model, it'll tell you what your monthly payments need to be back to yourself. You will just take care of it with the credit card, take a loan from your bank. As soon as that loan hits your checking account, pay the credit card off. Don't keep a balance on it. Pay the credit card off. You'll add that payment as a bill, and then you'll slowly pay yourself back. And paying yourself back, the way I have it built is, when you take a loan from your bank, you're taking the loan at a simple interest. When you're paying yourself back, you're paying yourself at amortized. So you're increasing your bank. Everything is coming back to you, and it all will scale with you. It scales with you depending on what point of stage you're at. Whether you have $5 or 5 million, it'll scale with you. So guys, again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Appreciate a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one.